Okay, another Patreon Q&A. Again, we are in VCV Rack. This time I thought we can maybe create a nice relaxing patch, some loops with a few of the felt instruments or VSTs or plugins. We have quite a few questions this month, so let's quickly already start. I will just use the complex simpler. Here I have the Blisco cello, which is a cello instrument that I can play with my keyboard, which is quite nice. So maybe we can record this, the cello, maybe I will just make it a bit louder. Just record this one chord that will always continue looping, and maybe record another voice, and then we can start with the questions. Record. Why is it not recording? Trigger, because I have nothing connected. Now, okay, record. Very nice. Let's see. Let's give it a bit of silence, just so it's not repeating all the time. Already I can add maybe, there it has already reverb, nice. Let's add even more reverb a bit. Why here there is reverb, I'm not so sure. Okay, so now we have this one here. Let's connect this. Maybe we can add also some delay to this, so it's not fading out so quickly. Let's see, a bit more repeats, maybe a shorter delay, maybe a ping pong. Let's see. Nice. Now let's create a nice, hopefully it will be nice melody on top. I have here the cello, as I mentioned, but I have also the viola instrument. So this was the Blisco cello. Let's use the viola. And maybe with the viola we can create a nice, I will just use another complex simpler, a nice melody line, and then we will start with the questions. Just connect it here. Let's see. We have a few different modes here. We have arc rise. Let's go with Legno sustains. Let's see how it sounds like. Do you hear something? I'm not so sure I can hear anything. Where is it? It's this one here. That's the level. Okay, let's select something else. Something a bit more, maybe the trills or the tremolo. Let's go with the tremolo. Let's see. Okay, but now on channel 2 we have no reverb. Okay, so now let's record something. Okay, a few seconds of silence, and now let's see. Nice. Very nice. Okay, let's start with the first question. Again, we have this month quite a lot of questions, which is great. Thank you so much, Patreons. Really amazing. Okay, Stefan Apollo. Hi Omri, hi. What about crashes with hardware? Except power supplies issues, 100% analog modules can crash. What about the digital synth modules? Okay, so I still never experienced any crashes with analog modules. Not with oscillators, not with sequencers. I have Moog Slicer, which is 100% analog. I'm pretty sure. Never had any issues with it. Rampage is 100% analog. Never had any issues with it. What else is 100% analog that I have? Not so many things, actually, you know. Yeah, but never mind. I never had any issues. I think Psych cannot be 100% analog because it has the VCA there with everything, all of the different modes. But yeah, never had any issues with 100% analog modules. I cannot tell you if they cannot crash. I mean, crash, I'm pretty sure they cannot because they are not computers. But if they cannot, if there are no issues with them, of course, there are components that can go bad or whatever. So I'm pretty sure they can have problems or issues, but it will not happen so often as with digital modules or synths. I have quite a lot of modules like Psych that I mentioned already that is a sort of a hybrid. I'm pretty sure that Psych is a sort of a hybrid because it has all the different modes. I'm pretty sure it cannot be analog. So the oscillator itself is analog, but there are some digital parts in it that can cause issues. What else? About digital modules, for example, the new ADDAC I got had a few issues at the beginning. It can crash. Now it's fixed already in the firmware update. I had a few issues. I had the Nebulae, I had a few issues with it. Luba, for example, I had a few issues with it. I had to restart it once. Arbor, I have it for more than a year, and one time I had to install the firmware again because it just didn't work. So yeah, with digital modules it will happen more often. Of course, it will. If it happens too often, then something is wrong with the module. But I'm pretty sure it will happen more often than with analog, if at all. If it will happen with analog at all. But again, I had the Arbor more than a year. Only once it had an issue. Luba, I have it also more than a year. Maybe twice I noticed something weird with it. So it's not happening too often, but it does happen. With digital synths, I have only the Microfreak and I have the Microcosm pedal. With both, I never had any issues. They never crashed. They never no weird behaviors or anything. So I'm not so sure what to say. Because I never had any issues with them. With my laptop, of course, it's a computer. I had a few issues. With the ES9, I had a few issues. But again, it's not so often. It happens. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure that analog modules cannot crash as like digital modules can crash because they are not computers. They don't have any. If you think about Arbor, for example, Arbor is a computer, basically. And if you think about Morphogene it's a computer. The ADDAC, the new ADDAC looper, it's a computer. So of course it will crash every once in a while. And we will have to live with it, I guess. Okay, let's have a look at another question before we continue with something else, with another voice. Might be a bit off topic and better for your Q&A session. Brian Smith. Hi, but I'd be interested to know more about Distrokid and your experiences. Okay, so I'm using Distrokid, I think more than 2 years now. For more than 2 years now. I'm not sponsored by Distrokid. They are not paying me. This video is not sponsored by Distrokid. I paid for my subscription with my own money, and I'm not getting any discounts or anything. So I will say this, Distrokid, for me, it works great. It's affordable, it's really affordable, and it's really easy to use. You just upload your stuff, enter a few details, and Distrokid is doing everything else for you, sending it to Spotify, iTunes, Apple, Tidal, everything that is out there, Amazon, YouTube also, and stuff like this. So your music is everywhere. It's great if you want to put your music out there. This is what I wanted. I'm not spending so much time dealing with it, so I'm not worrying about playlists and stuff like this. I just want my music to be out there. If people want to listen to it, great. If not, then not. So yeah, I think Distrokid is really easy to use. It's really affordable. There might be other solutions out there that maybe other people prefer to use. Again, for me, it's not so important because I'm not dealing with it so much. I'm not worried about it so much. For me, Bandcamp is more important. YouTube is important for me. But Spotify and all of this, I'm not so sure still what I think about it, and I'm not so concerned about it. So for me, Distrokid is amazing because it's easy and it's affordable. And again, this is not sponsored by Distrokid or anything, but there is a link in the description if you want to join Distrokid, not join, if you want to subscribe to Distrokid. And if you do it through the link, I think you will get also a discount, like 7%, 5 or 7%, or 8 maybe even, or maybe 12. I'm not so sure, you have to see, you have to look. And I will also get something. I'm not so sure what, but I also will get something. But again, this is not sponsored. I'm not working for Distrokid. I pay with my own money for the subscription, and I didn't get any discount or anything. I just got this link, which I think anyone can get. So it's not something special. It's sort of an affiliate link that anyone can get. So that's it. I have a really good experience with Distrokid. Again, it's really easy to use. It's doing everything, all of the work for you. Your music will be more or less everywhere on all the important platforms. And it's quite affordable. What else do you need? I'm not so sure. It's more or less everything one needs, oh? Okay, so those were 2 questions. Let's go back to our patch. Listen to it a bit. I have some tea. Yes, let's have a look at another instrument. So we had the cello, we had the viola. Kiemno is a sort of an interesting hybrid between piano and something like this. Oh, this is nice. Nice, this we can record. This was easy. Let's use another complex simpler. We have also a question about looping and about Simpliciter later, so we will have a look at a few more things. Let's just record this short loop, maybe something else. Okay, this is okay. Let's see. Just a bit slower. This is so nice. Just a bit of silence, just so it's not always looping again and again. Let's have a listen to this. Okay, great. And again, we need some reverb. You know what I will... No, maybe not on this voice. Maybe on a different voice. 4. So nice, so nice. Let's take the lows a bit down. Oh, I will take the lows a bit down. This is so nice, seriously. Simple and effective. I think Kiemno is free also, I'm not so sure. Really nice. What we can also do is, let's add another layer here with Kiemno, right? Let's see what happens. No, this is not what I wanted. I want to add another layer with Kiemno. And actually I will also mix them so we are not using so many channels on the mixer. Let's see. And what I will do, I will play more or less the same notes, but higher. Or maybe no, more or less the same notes, not higher, the same notes, and I will take it an octave down, so it will play slower, and also a sort of a bass. Let's see. Just those notes. Let's see. Now, octave down. And maybe also reverse. Yes. Indeed. I love working like this, with loops, letting them loop and just listen. I mean, it's nothing is synced, so every time they will meet in different places and different notes will meet or create all sorts of harmonies. It's really interesting. Okay, nice. Let's have a look at the next question. We had Brian Smith, thank you, Brian. Andrew Plester, hey there, Omri, I've been wanting to utilize the Simpliciter more from Nischi, which is a great module. I've been wondering how would I get, let's say, a drum loop in sync with the sequencers or with more Simpliciters. Is there a way to adjust the grid points and sequence the individual parts? The main thing I'd like to do is chop a sample in time with everything else. Andrew, thank you for your question. This is a great question. I'm not so sure I have the answer for everything, but I will try. How would I get, let's say, a drum loop in sync with the sequencers or Simpliciters? So let's say I will go here up, okay? See, maybe we will use it, maybe not, we will see. Let's use Simpliciter. Let's say that I have here a drum loop. And I will open, let's say, 125. So I have here a drum loop. I'm sorry, but I will have to mute all of the nice things we made now. And let's work for a second with the Simpliciter here, okay? Right. I have here a drum loop. Maybe I can... something like this. Very nice. Okay. So we have a drum loop, and I have also, let's say, a sequencer. Let's say the grid sequencer sequencing the FM operator, and let's say that I want to sync it, okay? I have here, it's running to a clock. And let's randomize the notes. And let's see. Right. Not in sync whatsoever. Now, of course, I know already the BPM of the drums here, so I can set the BPM and set the reset, and they should be in sync. But let's say that you don't know the BPM, or let's say that you just recorded something, you don't want to worry about the BPM. Let's say that you didn't use even a clock, you used an LFO, you don't know the BPM. So let's just say that you want to sync this. So Simpliciter I made a video about Simpliciter, but since then it had a few updates. And one of those updates was a ramp output. And the ramp output will basically output a ramp from the starting, it will start at 0 of the start of the loop. You can see this here. This is the start of the loop, and the end of the loop will be positive 10 volts, which is here. So basically we get a saw wave or a ramp. Now there are a few modules, for example, ZZC. ZZC has a few modules that are working with a phase clock or a ramp clock, which means that if I use, for example, let's use the clock, I remove the scope, which means that basically, do we have phase output? Yes. You see, so, which means that basically also this clock, you see, if I take it down, if I take it up, we get basically a saw wave. Also, this clock is working with phase. Now, what it means, if I connect the ramp here again, what it means like this. For example, when you have a clock resolution of 4 ppqn, you have a clock resolution of 4 pulses per quarter note. Every quarter note, you have 4 pulses. In the case of a ramp or a phase clock, you get more or less, it's not infinite, of course, it's according to your sample rate, but you get many more pulses per whatever, per quarter note, because you have every sample of this ramp is basically a part of the clock resolution. So you can enter everything in between, which is great for if you are doing micro timing or all sorts of things, and the sync is much better, will work much better with the phase clock because the clock resolution is much higher. I'm pretty sure that it's basically your sample rate, so it's 48,000 pulses per quarter note or something like this, because you have all of the samples to work with in between. You don't just have the 4 ppqn, you have all of it in between. So you can use it as a clock again with something like the ZZC divider, which is, it's called a divider, but it's also a multiplier. It's a phase clock divider and multiplier. So you can use this phase, this ramp in the phase input, and you will get basically a clock that you can use. So for example, I always remove the scope. Let's add the scope again. So for example, if I take the clock output, and let's have a look again at the ramp. And now let's say that I will multiply it. The ratio will be 1 to 16. So you will see, you cannot see the clock. Here you can see we will get a clock. You can see here the light actually goes on together with this clock, with this ramp clock. Again, it's a phase clock. It's called the phase clock. So now let's say that I have a ratio to 1 to 16. Basically, I multiply this by 16. I can use this to be the main clock for clocked, basically, because we have the clock output. If I send it to the BPM and I change the mode, let's say I changed it to 2 ppqn, let's say 4, and I will have to multiply it by, let's say, 1632, let's say. We will have, if I have it at 2 pulses per quarter note, no, I have to multiply it by 64 then, because it's a really long loop, which means that the ramp is really long, which means that the clock is really slow, basically. But you see here, I have it set to 2 ppqn, so 2 pulses per quarter note, and I have this clock multiplied by 64. It's not really multiplied because it's a phase, but you know what I mean. The ratio is 1 to 64, and we have 125 BPM, which is the same BPM as our loop. I can show you this here. The name of the loop is loop 6, 125 BPM. So you see we got the same BPM, the same tempo as our drums. And again, if you don't know the BPM, it doesn't matter. It will just find it through this ramp output. And you use, for example, the ZZC divider, which is not only a divider, but never mind. And you can, like this, sync clocked with it, for example, or you can sync your different sequencers. Now what I will do like this. I will reset the sample and I will reset the sequencer, and now they should be in sync. right? Just like this. So you can use the ramp output to the divider from ZZC, and then use the divider to change the ratio of the clock and use it to sync either clocked, and then you have a whole clock you can use, or to sync other sequencers, and so on. So you can really go to town with this method to sync either clocks or sequencers. Let me mute this for a second. Now, syncing other simpliciters, this is difficult. This is a difficult thing to do because we don't have a clock input to Simpliciter. We don't have a phase input that we can use a ramp. I keep banging the mic. So this is quite a challenge. But what you can do, and you mentioned it also in your question, is there a way to adjust the grid points and sequence the individual parts? The main thing I like to do is chop a sample in time with everything else. So what you can do is you can, if I zoom in a bit, you can chop the transients, right? You can chop the kick and the snare and the hat like this, chop the transients and sequence them. Now, the problem with it is that you have to do it in the module, which means that you have to go to the slice maker and you have to listen to where is the kick and take the... It's really, it's not a fun process to do. I wrote Antonio. Antonio is the creator of the NISG modules, and I asked him if he has time to add support for splice points in Reaper. For example, there is a module, Morphogene. Simpliciter is the Morphogene's, poor man's Morphogene. So Morphogene will work. You can go into Reaper, and I think another software, I forgot the name, and you can add splice markers in Reaper, which is quite easy if you think about it. It's much easier than to work in Simpliciter. So you could basically, in theory, add splice markers, save the WAV file, and then when you load it into Simpliciter, it will load it already with the splice markers, which would be quite cool. Unfortunately, Antonio has a lot of work, his day job work, and he doesn't have time to deal with this right now. Hopefully in the future it will happen. But for now, what you can do, you can activate the grid and the peak, which will basically try to analyze the waveform. And with the threshold, you can change the threshold in the right-click menu. If you right-click the WAV file, you have here the threshold, so it will change and will splice everything for you, but it's not so amazing. So if we listen to this, let me get rid of the grid sequencer. No, let's leave it for a second. Okay, let's leave this. So now, first of all, we don't need the divider. We don't need to sync the clock because we are going to clock this. We are going to sync a Simpliciter to a clock. So now we have this, as you can see, a splice, and I can select a different. We have 36 all in all. Right, and what I can do is basically I can use, for example, the ADDR sequencer, right, and clock the ADDR sequencer with a clock. Let's reset it for a sample, and then I can use it to sequence the select. And if I randomize this, for example, right, so we get. I can also use a slower clock, let's say. So you get a rhythm, basically. Right, which is again in sync with the other sequencer. You can randomize this again. right? So we get the splices in sync. They are playing in sync with the sequencer because we sort of synced Simpliciter to the clock. Again, it's a bit harder to do, but this is one way you can do it. Of course, another way, and maybe now I can show you this, and this you can do with any of the samplers from Nischi. If we unmute this, for example, if I want, you know, one complex simpler or one Simpliciter in your case to start playing whenever another sample is starting to play, so you can use the end of cycle output of one sample and send it to the start of a different Simpliciter, and you deactivate cycle or loop. So now only when this sample reaches the end, or again starting actually a new cycle, also the other sampler will start a new cycle. So it's you're sort of syncing them. Of course, depends on the material you want to use, depends on the length of loop, for example. You know, so now whenever this one ends, this one will start. Let's have a listen to this. Let's see. Right. Now again, because this sample is shorter than this one, this sample will not play fully because it will be re-triggered. So this is not such a good solution in this case. But it's a bit tricky to sync Simpliciter to a clock or to a different Simpliciter or to a sequence, unless you do it like this when you chop the sample and you sequence it. Maybe, but again, you can get really interesting results and just sync it or trigger it with a different clock. So this can also be interesting. So let's see if I answer the question. Loop in sync with sequencer Simpliciter. As you saw this with the ramp output. Is there a way to adjust the grid points? I also showed you this. I hope this is what you are looking for. Please let me know. If not, write me and we can think of another solution. Andrew, thank you. Let's have a look at another question. Matthias, kept that. Hey Omri, I have a quick one, I hope, if a bit vague. Any tips on how to keep a looping voice, perfect for what we are doing now, playing recorded voice using Simpliciter or any other sampler player, fresh and interesting, keeping it fresh and interesting. I've been trying to push myself out of my comfort zone and I'm having a hard time using looping voices without getting bored of them after a bit. Thanks a ton. So the first tip I have for you is just what I'm doing here, is using a few loops that are not synced, that are not in sync, which means that they will always meet at different points. The harmony will be different, maybe the rhythms will be different, and it will sound not like one loop, but it will not sound like different loops that are repeating. It will sound like one continuous loop that is always changing, because again, it will the recorded material will meet in different places, which means that it will not be so boring at first. There are a few other things you can do, and let's have a look at it now. Let's start by changing, using another instrument. We have Helenko. The next one is Helenko, which is a sort of a kalimba or something like this, or a toy piano, I think. A toy piano. Man, the stuff from Felt are just brilliant. Let's start with the sustains. Let's record something like this, right? Just a simple loop that is always repeating. I will use another complex simpler. Hopefully nothing will crash because I'm not going to save anything. This is going to be a sort of a Zen patch. We will build it and then we will remove it, delete everything, and there is no way to go back to anything what we had. So let's quickly record this. What did I do? I forgot already. just something like this. I don't know, let's see. Right, so here we have a loop that is quite repetitive, and you might say quite boring. Right? So what I like to do with loops, just so they are not so repetitive, I like to use VCAs. And how do I use VCAs? Let's use Punch, for example, from Volt, which is a stereo VCA, which I really enjoy. Right? And then I will use, let's say, an envelope. I will use the AD envelope from Nischi. And I will set a nice long attack. And now whenever I trigger this envelope, only then the loop will come in. And then will go out, which means that if now I trigger this envelope at random times, we will always get a different section of the loop, which will not sound like a loop anymore. So this is also something I like doing. Usually what I use, for example, Morphogene has a built-in VCA. It has the mix with the CV input. What else? We have the looping delay has a built-in VCA. It has the feed level. Mimeophone has a built-in VCA. For example, stuff like this, which I do a lot in hardware. So if you are using also hardware, you can also do this trick quite easily. Also, I think, Magneto also has a wet amount, which is also a sort of a VCA. So now all what we need is some sort of random trigger to trigger this loop. So let's use, for example, what can we use? Let's see, let's have a listen to this. Okay, let's say that we use Simpliciter, and Simpliciter is not a problem. But here what I can use is I can use, for example, this loop here, which is quite active, it's quite moving. And I can use a comparator. Now a comparator, what it will do if I use here a scope, I hope it will say I'm not doing this too quickly. Right, so we have the waveform, right? And the waveform will go always above a certain level at different times, right? If it's playing, if it's not playing, now it's not playing, it's in 0. When it's playing, it's not on 0, the different levels, whatever. We can also use an envelope follower. I will not use an envelope follower in this case. Or actually I will, because this will be quite long. So anyway, let's use an envelope follower. I will use follow from Bog Audio. And I will use the same audio that you see here on the scope. If I move it a bit. Right, and you can see that we get a sort of an envelope that is following the amplitude of the audio. Right, the higher the amplitude of the audio, the level of the envelope also goes up. I can even accentuate this by raising the gain. I'm doing something really complicated for something really simple, but you see, then we have an envelope, and I can use this envelope. This will be now the blue trace. I can use this envelope with a comparator and say whenever this envelope goes above, let's say 2.5 volts, I want to have a gate coming out of here. So whenever we have, you see, whenever this envelope goes above 2.5 volts, let's wait for it. You see, we get a gate. See, just like this, just like this, just like this. Very nice. So now I can use this gate that we have here, that we created. It's not so random, but we will make it random with chances. Also from Count Modular. Basically, it's a Bernoulli gate which will, according to the probability we set, will output this gate, this trigger out of output A or out of output B. Wow, already 40 minutes, crazy. This is going to be a long one. So here we have the, right? We have, let's say, input A, and this will trigger the envelope. Again, according to the probability. So now we get this loop. I will solo it. Let's wait for it. Have a look here. You see? So this was one. Let's wait for it again. And this was a different section of the loop. We can have the ADDAC even shorter, so it's not playing so much. So again, it will play always a different section of the loop because we are triggering the envelope randomly. And now what we can do all sorts of things. We can send this, for example, to a delay. For example, right? And then maybe not so many repeats. Maybe even shorter delay times. Another thing I like doing is using also a filter. So if I use, for example, I will use Freak because I really like this filter from Volt. So I will send a copy of this loop. Again, this is a loop, a repetitive loop. Again, I will use a mixer just so I'm not using so many channels on the main mixer. Right, so I'm going to use this loop. Again, in this case, it will just keep on playing. I can solo it after the mixer, right? It just keeps on playing. What I can do, I can take the cutoff a bit down. And not let it through all the time, so it's not always playing. And just bring it in at different times. Again, I can use an envelope, or I can use an LFO for this, for example, a really slow LFO, just to modulate the cutoff point. And again, the LFO is not in sync with the loop, so always a different section of the loop will come out. So it's not so repetitive all the time, it's not so boring, I guess. Don't have any more tea. Right? This is another thing I like doing. Right, so you have a loop that is always looping, always repetitive, but you change the timbre with the filter. You bring it in and out with a VCA and an envelope. And again, also the first tip that I really recommend is creating loops that are not in sync. Of course, if you are using, if you have, also if you have a rhythmic patch, also you can have loops that are not in sync, and then it will not sound like they are looping all the time, because they are not starting and ending at the same place. And they will meet the other voices at different places, create different harmonies, create different textures, and so on. Okay, what I'm also going to do before we move on to the next section, let's see just if I answer this. Yeah, I hope I answered it. If of course there are a few also more things you can do, but I think with this you can experiment first and see how you move. By the way, Simpliciter, no, also the complex simpler, you can also sequence the play speed and sequence the forward and reverse, which can also be interesting. So it can cycle once forward, once reverse, or randomly. You can also experiment with this. But let's move on to the next question. But actually, before we do this, I'm going to add another plugin from Felt, which is not an instrument, it's an equalizer, it's a filter, which I like using just like this, just putting it like this on the master, because it adds really interesting color to everything. So I will just use it, everything will go through it. This is the plugin. Maybe we will use it also later in a different context, but let's see. We already have 50 minutes, wow, more or less. Very nice. Okay, so the next question. Thank you again, Matthias. The next, Robert Slade. Hello, Omri. I hope all is well. Thank you. Can you recommend a hardware sample and hold similar to the Bog Audio one in VCV Rack, preferably where it is just triggered by a gate and doesn't need external voltage to sample, also on a budget? Thank you. So I have one or two. I forgot already. Let's see. I have two recommendations for you. I have two modules to recommend. First one is the random step from Distrokid and solid state. I forgot how the frequency, solid state frequency. I forgot how they are called. SSF and Distrokid. It's not so affordable. I mean, it's not so cheap. But it's a really interesting sample and hold module because, first of all, it has built-in pink noise, so you don't need to input noise if you want random signals, just like the sample and hold one. And you have also two outputs. You have three sample and holds, but two outputs for each. You have one bipolar, which is great, and one unipolar, so you can have only unipolar sample and hold 0 to 5 volts, which is also quite interesting. So basically you have six, actually. You have two outputs for each section. So you have actually 6 sample and holds you can use. There are a few problems with it. Again, it's not so it's not expensive, but it's not so affordable. This is firstly, and secondly, I don't think it's available now anywhere. I want this module also for quite some time, but I couldn't find it, and I hope you will find it. At least in Europe, it's not available. I don't know where you are, but I couldn't find it. Maybe you can find it secondhand. I really recommend it. I want it for myself also, because again, you have 6 outputs and internal pink noise, which is great, also for pitch information, so the notes don't go too high, or there are more low notes, let's say, or something like this. Yeah, so this can be great. Another option I have for you is the Disting Mark IV or the Disting EX. Maybe you have one already. It has a dual sample and hold model. This is the H2, that you can choose noise for the input. So you have here parameters 2 and 3 will add white noise into the signal, allowing you to use the algorithm as a source of random voltages without having to patch anything into the input. So you can have built-in noise, and you can also add slew, so you can turn this sample and hold into a random smooth signal, and you have also offset, so you can offset this up and down, which is quite cool. Disting, I have the Disting. I used it a few times, this dual sample and hold, and it's great. So if you have the Disting already, or if you are thinking about getting the Disting Mark IV or the EX, so you have sample and hold in there as well, which is quite cool. This is more or less really similar to the Bog Audio one, but again, it's your choice. There are not so many out there, unfortunately. I have the 1U noise tools from IntelliGel. I'm not so happy with it. I'm not a fan of this module, and I'm always looking for different sample and hold sources. Not always, but I often look for different sample and hold sources. Okay, let's add another voice. We had a Lenko. Let's see what's the next one. Let's see. We have Yanso. Oh, Yanso is a nice one. Yanso is it's an interesting instrument. It's this plucky guitar instrument, similar to a kalimba in a guitar, something like this. Which is really nice, but it has also other modes. For example, it has piano drop. Let's solo this for a second. I think it's this one here. Piano drop, which should be something like this. Whoa. I think it's a bit distorted here. Right, so we can change the spread and the pulse. Take the reverb down and the echo on it. Oh, we have, what else do we have? We have disperse. No need for this. Oh, maybe this can be our bass. Ooh, this is hot. This is nice. I think I will use this as our bass. Just a simple, it's quite hot here, just a simple drone. And let's use Simpliciter, and I will show you also why in a second. So I will just record this drone, this here, into Simpliciter a bit. And I will show you also in a second why. Lots of movement here, this is nice. Just adding a few notes here and there. Right, something like this, and let's stop the recording. Okay, so now if we listen to this, 6 reverb. If it reaches the end, let's normalize this. In the right click menu we can normalize this. There will be a click here, I believe. Let's see. It's not a click, but it's not a smooth loop. So a smooth drone. It has this end to it. So what we can do, there's a trick here in Simpliciter where it will splice the sample in half. It will move the left part to the right part to the left part, and will add a crossfader here in the center, which means that the loop will basically loop to infinity, and this is called the S-Pen trick for no clicks in looping samples. So now there should be no click, and it will be here the transition from the end to the beginning will be silky smooth. Let's listen. Right? Cool, right? This is a nice trick. Okay, so we have our bass. What I will do is I will use another freak, but in this case I will use Ferox. And Ferox has, the drive is actually drive and distortion. So we're going to distort this a bit, this nice bass here. Let's see. just a bit. Yeah. And then again we can add a nice LFO, not synced to anything, to modulate the filter a bit. Actually here we have a stereo filter, so we can add different modulation for the left and the right. Right? Very cool. Really nice textures. Okay, next question. Robert, thank you for your question. I hope I helped you with this. Almanax, hi Omri, I'd love to hear, by the way, before I continue, Almanax, if you don't know Almanax and his music, please check it out, really amazing. I'd love to hear your suggestions on what would an ideal Eurorack sequencer for my rack. I'm trying to decide between buying a couple of clocking logic modules to pair with my ornament and crime, or something more like a powerhouse, Hermode or Westlich. What do you think it's best for performance and composition, a scattered sequencing setup or a centralized module? Thank you in advance for your thoughts. Thank you so much for this question. Okay, so I know your music, more or less, I guess. Yeah, and I think... Okay, so let's talk about myself first. For me, I think it's really important. Let me see, I feel like I'm screaming here. I will take this down a bit. So for me, it's really important to have at least one sequencer, which is the main sequencer that I can always go to and control different things from one module, and I don't have to look and search for different modules. In my case, it's not a module. In my case, it's the Keystep Pro, which is a gift. Ever since I got it, it's just been an amazing sequencer because I have 4 tracks there, trigger outputs. The drum outputs I usually use as random trigger outputs. And I can do everything from one place. I don't have to search things, especially for performances. In my opinion, it's better that everything is, not everything, but the sequencing, the brains behind everything should be in one place. So I don't have to search things everywhere in the case or go through all sorts of cabling and stuff like this. So I think also for you, having one unit, one sequencer, the brains behind everything, I think it's better if you have it as a one module. And I will go to the next section in a second, but let's speak about this one module. I would love to have once the Erika Synth's black sequencer. I think I have a picture of it here. Yeah, this black sequencer from Erika Synth. I think I don't have it. I would love to have it once, but now it's not the time to get another sequencer, another module. I think it's a really interesting sequencer. Also for your type of music, which is ambient generative, correct me if I'm wrong, but ambient generative sequencing, I think this can be really interesting. I don't have it, I don't have any experience with it, but I hear only good things about it. It has again 4 channels that you can use. It has all sorts of probability settings that you can use, which is great. And again, it's in one module, so you look in one place and you have the brains at your disposal. There's another sequencer that I don't have a picture of here because I just thought about it before. The vector sequencer, which is also really interesting with probability. I think you will really enjoy it. I would also love to get my hands on a vector once, because it has really lots of probability settings and different generative stuff that you can do, which can be really interesting. And again, having this everything in one section, in one module, at least the brains, at least what's running your patch, I think it's much more comfortable and it's much more hands-on. Now, but that said, I also believe that having different small sequencers scattered around your case, for example, I have the voltage block, I have the MOOC slicer. What else do I have? I have just two sequencers. I think so. Let me think. Yeah, the MOOC slicer and voltage block. Well, voltage block is 8 sequencers basically. So having sequencers scattered around your case, around your patch, small sequencers, is also really interesting, also for your type of music, which is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, ambient, generative, experimental even. I think it's really interesting for modulation purposes, for generative voices that you can use. For example, if you're using the black sequencer, let's say, or the vector, I believe it has a built-in clock, or you use a clock and it's clocking all of the sequencer together. But if you have different sequencers, you can clock them with different clocks, which means that you can clock them with random triggers, generative clocks, generative triggers, and create all sorts of different textures and add more organic and more life. More organic? Add organic. Create a more organic patch and add life to your patches with small sequencers. So I think, as always in modular, the answer is both. I think that having a main sequencer and also small, you have the ornament and crime, maybe you can use this as small sequencers. I don't have it. I don't think it's something that I can connect with. But I'm pretty sure it's a really interesting sequencer. There are also, I think, 4 sequencers, right? Or is it 4 quantizers? I'm confused. But anyway, so I really think that having one sequencer, having one module, one unit that is the brains, and also small sequencers scattered around your case, and also mixers, by the way, can be really interesting for all sorts of different things. Again, for generative, for ambient, but also for rhythmic elements. Can be really interesting. I recommend the voltage block if you want. It's not so small, but it's interesting, although it has only one clock input for 8 sequencers, but still it's interesting. It has a clock divider built in, so you can use it as well. MOOC slicer is amazing, but it's just 8 steps, and it's more of a switch actually than a sequencer, but there are enough small sequencers out there. So again, one big unit, one main unit for the main sequencing ideas, let's say, and also small sequencers scattered. I think it can really open up a patch and can add really lots of life to any music. I don't want to say to your music, because your music is already full of life, but you know what I mean. Okay, let's see. Let's have another question and then we will move on to another voice. I hope I helped you with this, Salmanax. Thank you again. Paichi, potential solutions to avoid repeating notes when making generative patches. This question also came up on the VCV Facebook group. Okay, so basically the question is like this. You have a generative patch and you don't want to have repetitive notes. For example, you don't want to have 2 or 3 C notes one after the other. So let's create something like this. Let's use not something from Felt this time, but let's use, for example, marbles for mutable instruments, and I will use the FM operator because it's easy, and I will again record something on the complex simpler. But before we will record it, let's listen to what's going on here, okay? Shall I use marbles? I'm not so sure marbles will work so nicely here, but let's see. I will set it to minor, and I will quantize this sequence, and I will set this to blue here, or green, which means positive, negative 2 volts. Positive, negative? No, just positive 2 volts, which means 2 octaves. This is what I want. Now we have the gate output, and we have the pitch output. And let's have a listen to this for a second. Oh, we don't have so many mixers. Okay. Yeah, it's not working so nicely. I'm going to use there is something with marbles in VCV, I'm not so sure why. I'm going to use a quantizer. Okay, just so it will stay in the same scale with the other voices. Okay, now I'm going to take the jitter all the way up, just so it's a bit more generative and random. Right, now I don't want to have the same notes twice. I don't want to have twice C or twice E flat or whatever the scale is. And let me actually demonstrate this with a different module before we take marbles. Let's use 12 key. Okay, 12 key. I hit G, it plays G. I will solo this just so we can listen to this. Okay, I hit G, it plays G. I hit G again, it plays G, which means that if marbles will output the same voltage more than once, it will play the same note. Now, I don't want this to happen. So there are two ways, there are many ways, I'm sure, but two ways that I want to show you. First of all, you can use Quantum from ML. Now, Quantum is a quantizer, but it has a really interesting feature that it has the gate and trigger outputs. The gate output will output a gate that will stay high as long as there is a change in voltage, which means that if there is no change in voltage, which means that if the G stays the G, it will not reset the gate and it will not trigger our voice. So if I use the gate from Quantum and I just enter all of the notes, I don't need it to quantize anything, I just need it for the gates, right? And I use the same pitch. So now if I hit C, because there is a change, we were in G. If I hit C, there is a change in voltage, we will get a gate. If I go to G again, change in voltage, we will get a gate. But if I hit G again now, we will not get a gate because there is no change in voltage. So I hit it, you can see it turns here green, but there is nothing, the gate is not resetting, the gate stays high, and we don't get any change in notes. Now the problem with it is, let's see if it happens also with the trigger. So the problem with the gate is that the gate stays high, which means that if I have the sustain on, it will keep on playing. It will not change the note, but it will keep on playing. But if I use the trigger, it will not unless there is a change in voltage. A change, in this case, in notes. So it will not play the same note twice. Now there is another way you can do this. And this is with the slope detector from Count Modular. The slope detector will also detect changes in voltage and will output a trigger accordingly. So you can output a trigger whenever the voltage goes up. In our case, let's call it notes. When the notes go up, then there will come out a trigger. When there is no change, then it will output always a gate. As you can see here, the light is on. When the notes go down, it will output a trigger. Or when there is movement, so only when there is change in voltage. So again, if I use the pitch information, here is the input, the pitch information, and I'm using the movement to gate our voice, only when there is movement. So if now I move to E, there is movement, we get a gate. If I move to F, there is movement, we will get a gate. If I move to G, there is movement. If I stay on G, nothing will happen. You see, I'm triggering G, but nothing happens, right? There is no movement in voltage, so there is no change in notes. I don't know why I use the marbles. I will just delete it. I just wanted to show you this, and we will not record it. I think we will stay with felt, but I just wanted to show you this. Again, there is no movement, so there is no gate. The same with the rising. For example, this can be quite interesting. You have a sequence, a generative sequence, and you have one voice for only when the notes go up. You have one note only when the voice goes down, and you have another voice only when there is movement, for example. So here, only when the notes will go up. Here I'm on G, I'm going to A, there is a gate. I'm going to C, there is a gate. I'm going to C, this was B. I'm going to C, going down, there is no voice because it's going down. And you will get the voice only when the notes go up. Right? There is nothing here. And I can use another voice, for example. This is just for this demonstration. Can use another voice. This will be on the right, so there will be left and right. Let's take it an octave up also. And this will happen only when the sequence, when the notes are going down. So now, right? Quite interesting. You can create really interesting voicing with this slope detector. So again, those are two examples how you can create this effect that there are no repetitive notes in a generative patch. And even more than this, you can even make this more creative use of the slope detector and create a different voice when the notes go up, a different voice when the notes go down, and so on. Okay, let's add another voice. Let's see, we had Yanso. Let's go with Leko. Leko is a really nice piano from Felt. It has also all sorts of different modes. And in this case, let's do something a bit granular. Let's use Supercell. Wow, we're already an hour and 15. Let's use Supercell. I will do something like this. Let's go with 8 seconds, and I will go with pitch shift time stretch. And I will just play a few. Let's see why I'm not here. This is the piano. It's a bit low. Right, and we can change. You can open the EQ also. Right, so this I'm going to freeze into Supercell. So let's play a few notes. Let's see, I need to raise here the input. Hold. And let's see what we got. I don't know. Let's see. I'm going to solo this for a second. Let's take the mix all the way up. You can raise the output. Now I can scan through this buffer. Change the size of the grains. Change the density, which will change it from smeared to more focused. Maybe we can modulate this. There is an internal modulation source just by turning the attenuators. And the shape will be to the right, a high pass filter, so we can high pass the nodes a bit. I don't like this modulation on the density, it adds clicks. But we can use an LFO, or even better, random modulation source like Walk. And it's smooth also. The same for the position, for example. Right, so it will scan, maybe slower. Nice granular touch. Modulate the size a bit. Very time stretched. And we can add some space here also. Okay, we have a few more questions. This is going to be a long video. Okay, Paichi, thank you for your question. Another one from the Nick Westerveld, I guess. Hi Omri, hi. I never knew being a fun guy, a fun girl. A fun girl, the Nick. A fun girl could be this great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. In just 4 months since discovering VCV Rack, you have educated and inspired me greatly and have made my compositions a lot better. Thank you. As a consequence, it has also made my computer grind to a halt due to my patches growing ever bigger, especially since you introduced me to multi-tap delays. Holy toadstools! There are so many ways to have fun with those. Yes, indeed. My most recent patch made my computer glitch quite badly, but then I took an overall view of it and counted the modules I was using and came to 413 modules. Wow. So my question for you is, how big was the biggest patch you've ever made? So I don't have any memory of the biggest patch, but I think that on my live streams, I tend to go a bit overboard because I don't spend so much time thinking about what I'm doing. More or less, I'm just adding modules and adding modules and adding modules without thinking too much. It's more of an intuitive process rather than something a bit more calculated, I guess. So on my live streams, I think on all of my live streams with VCV Rack, I tend to use a lot of modules, a lot of modules. You have more than 400 modules used. Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, I think my live streams are crazy. I remember there was one, I think it was with Maze from Sturmelder, which was quite intense. This drum and bass live stream. Yeah, crazy. 400, more than 400. I wonder how many. Here there are not even 100. 400 modules. Wow, crazy. I have to check this. Crazy stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for joining. The next question, Robert Slade. Hello, Omri. Hi. Maybe late for this one. No, it's not. But you can confirm if you can choose to just use the granular section of the ADDAC looper. Due to rack space, I would not be able to host the CV module as well. Also, do you recommend it? So no, you cannot use only one section or the other. You need both for the module to work. One is the more of the engine, loop granular engine, and one is the CV inputs and the ins and outs, so you can not use them separately, you have to use them together. And if I recommend it, so again, it depends what you are looking for. If you like granular, yes. If you like looping, if you want to get it for looping, then not so much. Not so much. If you like looping, I think, what can be nice for looping? It depends which type of looping, but I think Luba can be, the looper from Instruo can be nice. The thing is, it has in-sync looping is a bit difficult, but you can do in-sync looping with the ADDAC actually, but it's a bit, I look at it more of as a granular looper, I guess. If you're looking for something like this, then yes, totally, it's great. It has so many options, so many CV inputs that you can use. I really enjoy it. It really is intuitive because everything is hands-on, just like there on the panel. And it's really, really fun to use also. So yes, I recommend it if this is something you are looking for. If not, then I'm not recommending it. But yeah, you cannot use it separately. You have to use both sections together. Robert said another one. I've just listened to your by the ADDAC video on YouTube. It was great. Thank you. Would a quick run through of the patching process be possible? Okay, so I have here the ModularGrid that those are the modules I used by the lake. I took this case, it's a Moog case, to the lake nearby here, and I recorded this patch, and I also recorded the surroundings of the birds and all of this, and I added it also live to the patch. So what I did is like this. I had the Scion, the Instruer Scion. It was connected to a plant. Is this a plant? Maybe. To a plant I had nearby, so the plant generated CV, and it has 4 channels. So what I did, I used 2 channels for pitch. I sent them to the this thing with a dual quantizer set, so I had a dual quantizer quantizing those notes or this pitch information or these signals coming from Scion. And this went once to Plets and once to the BIA, to the Basimulus. Those were the 2 voices I had. And then Plets went to the Mimeophone and the BIA went to beads for delay, for reverb, for granulizing a bit with beads. And I mixed everything with the ST Mix. And this went to my Zoom recorder, which also recorded the birds around me. So everything was recorded live. The birds you hear on the recording are the birds that were there at the time of the recording. Now, another thing what I did, I triggered Plets and Basimulus, also with Scion, but Scion went first to branches, which is a Bernoulli gate, adding probability to the gates. So from Scion it went to the 2 branches, and from there it triggered once Plets and once the BIA. Now I had another voice which came from the sample drum. I had a few different samples. I think it was a Leko, like we've seen now, and Yanso also from Felt. And I think also the cello. I had a few different samples there that were also triggered from Scion. And I just, they were just playing in the background, also being triggered randomly. And this was all of it. It was a really simple patch, nothing too complicated. This case I have is the Moog case. Sorry, the Moog case. It has 104 HP, which is not so much. So this is all I could take with me. Actually, after the fact, I looked here and I said to myself that I could add the Oct also, but I didn't. And the power supply I used is Poly and Anywhere, which connects to a power bank, a power brick USB. This was my power, which was quite interesting and was quite fun. And this was all of it. This was the patch again. There was a plant connected to Scion, generating notes, generating gates, generating CV, and running this patch. Basically a really simple patch, nothing really too complicated. Okay, Robert, thank you again. Another one, Steven Benedict. Yeah, this was an interesting question. I have a question about compression in VCV Rack. When I'm trying to add compression to bass, I get inconsistent sharp transient and the attack that can cause some clicks in the sound. I can get rid of it by raising the threshold, but it's not a point where the compression really isn't doing anything. I try adding a limiter after compression and it kind of works, but it ends up cutting into the meat of the sound for me. It doesn't seem to matter the compressor. None of the ones I have found in VCV have a look-ahead control, which seems like it would solve it. I'm just starting to learn about them and not so sure how to deal with them. Besides the transient and like the result, any advice would be appreciated. So we had a nice talk, Steven and me, or Steven and I. Never mind. And the thing is with the compressor was basically the compressor settings. So if you look at the many compression, for example, if we have, let's create a quick bass loop. Again, the FM operator to the rescue. Let's do something, what am I doing here? Something like this. And again, I'm sorry, but I will just solo this section for a second. This will go through the compression. Let's take the mix all the way down for a second. Let's say that this is our bass, right? Now, let's take the threshold a bit down so the compressor starts working. You can see it here. And now, if I have the ADDAC, all the way down, what it will do, it will compress, it will work already on the transient of this bass, which means that the transient, the ADDAC of the bass will not go through because the compression is set to directly compress it, which will mess the sound and can create sorts of clicks in the sound. What I recommend doing is if you have something with transients, drums, bass, transient bass, all sorts of different voices that have an ADDAC to them, like drums, for example. And you want to keep this ADDAC, you want to keep those transients, you want to keep it sharp, raise the ADDAC time. Because then it will let the transients through and only then will compress the sound. Right, so if now we listen to this, you can hear, if I take it up a bit, you can hear that the transient is not really. This is without. And this is with. Now if I take the ADDAC a bit up, you see? Listen to this again. Just a bit, doesn't have to be so long, just to let the transient go through, the ADDAC time to go through. Right. So you play with the ADDAC and the release, of course, and just let the transient go through. Again, this is working also with drums, with the transient bass, punchy bass, and yeah, and this will help you. We spoke already, Steven and I helped him already, but maybe some of you also have this problem. So the solution is just taking the ADDAC a bit up. Okay, the last question, let's see. An hour and a half already. Woo! Harry Frost. Hi Omri, I really enjoyed your ShapeMaster video, but find myself getting confused with timing once it's synced to a clock and the length parameter starts saying 4/4 and so on. I'm a total beginner with music theory, so can you shed some light on time signatures on ShapeMaster Pro, sync to a clock, and how one might use them in a VCV patch? Okay, so let's use the ShapeMaster. I'm sorry, I will have to mute also. I have to mute again the voices just for a second. I will use a mixer because I will want two voices. Okay, so let's do something like this. First of all, here the length on ShapeMaster is not a time signature. Unlike a time signature, the length is just the length of the envelope or whatever you are using. Because actually you can also use it as a clock, but let's start with this, okay? Let's use I will use the gate sequencer because it will be easier to show. And let's clock the ShapeMaster with the 48 ppqn. And let's also set the reset. And I will clock the gate sequencer with the clock multiplied by 4 with 4 ppqn. And I will show you also in a second why. Let's take again just the FM operator through the VCA. Right, nice. Okay, and here let's have a Hyatt, let's say. A Hyatt, okay. Let's see. Okay, so now this is basically it. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter notes. Now this is multiplied by 4, which means that we have, how can I explain it easily because of music theory stuff, which means basically that we have a clock resolution of 4. So for each quarter note we can have between each quarter note, we can have 4 notes or 3 notes actually, which means that a quarter note, one step smaller than a quarter note is 8th notes, one step smaller is 16th notes. So we have here 16th notes that we can play. Let's see if I can show you this. Right? So now the ShapeMaster is playing quarter notes. It says here 1 quarter. You can see here on the length. Maybe I'll do this. Here we have quarter notes and here we have 16th notes. So now if I want to have both of them in quarter notes, I have to remove the 16th notes and I will have quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. What does it mean, quarter note? It means that if we have a bar, in each of the sections, we have 4 quarter notes, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will repeat itself. So we have for each bar, we have a quarter note. Now, if I change the length here, for example, to a half note, it means that it will be just half of the times. It will be 1, 3, 1, 3. Let's change it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I hope I'm explaining it right. It's so hard to explain it just like this, but I hope it makes sense. So basically, the length of the ShapeMaster now became twice as long, because instead of playing 4 notes in a bar, it will play just 2. And now I can make it even longer. I can make it a whole bar, so 4 quarters. It will play all of the quarters. It will play the length will be as long as 4 quarters, a whole bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So it plays a whole bar. I can make it even longer. I can make it 2 bars long. So it will play 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and another time. Why I'm saying this is not really a meter, a time meter, because it's changing the length. You can see the length of this envelope basically changed, although this is a bit too complicated for now. Let's say that you mentioned 4/4, so let's go back to 4/4. Again, it will play the length of this envelope of this, whatever you have on ShapeMaster, will be in the length of 4 quarter notes of 1 bar. Can you see my hand? Yeah. So here the hi-hat will play 4 notes, 4 quarters, and the FM operator, the ShapeMaster, will play only once. Right? So this is 4/4 basically, the length of 1 bar. Now, there are also other divisions. For example, again, 16th notes, like we've seen before. So now the length will be a 16th notes. which means basically this. Right? So this is really, it's difficult to explain like this. Maybe if you want, we can have a Zoom session once where we can speak about this. Because it's hard just that I explain something and I have no reaction from the other side. But this is basically more or less it. Basically, it means the length of the note, but it has to be in relation to something. If you don't have it, well, you said it's synced to the clock, so you have it's related to the clock. Right, so you have, if it's 1 bar, it means that it will play the length of 4 quarter notes. Right? So this is more or less it. Again, let me know if this is okay, if it's understandable. It's really hard to explain it like this. If you want, let's email. You can write me an email and we can speak about this even more. I want to help you, but it's a bit harder like this. Without feedback, I cannot see what is going. So if you have any other questions or something like this. So let's leave it for now. And we have, wow, this was a long video. I think we will stop here. Yes, so this was a fun little relaxed patch. Thank you again, Patreons, for everything, for your questions, for your support. Thank you. Yeah. And that's it. Cheers.